Let's take a look inside Mr. Gibson's public speaking classroom.
Welcome back, Teacher Apartment Studios. Same great content, different shirt. Okay, today's topic, visual aids. I like to start off by answering the question, why? Part of your group project, you were tasked to develop visual aids. It wouldn't hurt for you to have this content, to have this information in your notes so that you can use it to review in relation to the visual aids that you are going to present. All right, check there. We are going to be having discussions in the class regarding a couple of speeches that we'll be showing. At this point, will be loosely almost halfway through the semester, I will be pushing you to make your comments about the visual aids used in the speech to have something behind it. So if I were to ask you, if they were good, for you to say yes because I thought they were pretty might not be the most sound answer. I mean, I'm happy that you got past the yes, but you didn't really give a sound justification as to why. And maybe even on a bigger level, the reason that I'd like you to have some, appreciation for this content, and maybe, whatever the amount of it is that you can retain, is you're going to have future projects and presentations, and it doesn't hurt for you to know or to have put in front of you what best practice looks like. And with that, here we go. 1, use sparingly. And what I find interesting about this could be counterintuitive to something that I'll ask you to think about later in regards to visual aids. But it doesn't hurt for you to hear one thing from one source, one thing from another source, and then ultimately somewhere in there you get to make a choice. You should be using them to highlight key points. And I could give you a giant reference page of information that would say, please do this. Quite often, and my apologies if that is the case, your educators put up paragraphs of information and then they're talking over that paragraph of information. Perhaps there's an expectation that you're writing that paragraph down as well. There's a lot of characters. For you as a viewer, if you're sitting in the back, right, all sorts of words, all sorts of things could be happening, all while someone is talking in your ear. That's too much stimulation. And you should really be asking yourself, what are people going to retain? What would I really expect that people should be writing down? If I were trying to sell you a product, I'm going to try to dial it down to as few words as possible, because if I put up a paragraph of information, it's probably going to be boring, which means that they're not going to be listening. Highlight key points. Look at that. Make them visible to the entire audience. There's a couple of ways you could think about doing this. 1, part of your preparation should be go into the room, set the stuff up, go to the back of the room, find yourself in the most difficult position in the room and ask yourself, can you see it? I look at that stuff without my glasses on. And generally speaking, if I can see it without my glasses, I'm thinking, okay, check, this could work. There's another way you could do it. You could just ask, right? I mean, how much have you rehearsed? How quickly could you enlarge those visual aids? What might people think of your ability in a pressure situation to manage someone saying, I'm having a difficult time seeing those? What I would also say to you is that if you go back to the second point, which is to highlight key points, it makes it too easy for you to make your words visible, easily seen by the entire. If you're making people strain, if you're making people work for it, they're going to check out. Your font should be, and I offer this as a general guideline to avoid the so many follies that I've witnessed in the past. It should be 32 font size or larger. And I get how there could be a mistake on someone that's building a presentation, because it's very easy for you to see 12 or 14 point font on your laptop, on your PowerPoint slide, while you're developing on your laptop right here. You put it on a large screen and people all the way in the back, they can't even make out those words. It's really fascinating to see how tiny it looks on a big screen, because you might think, oh, this will look larger than it would be to me right here, a small screen, but it's not. I am going to, if I were in the classroom, I would run an experiment where I would show you what the different font sizes look like on a PowerPoint slide, and rather than conducting the experiment, I'm just going to show it to you now. Right. So you take a look at these numbers and ask yourself, where should you be? Because the smaller your screen and the deeper your room, probably the larger you should be. And again, if you're highlighting key points, it doesn't hurt for you to be on the safe side, which would be larger. Okay. Talk to the audience and not your visual aids. How often, and I've watched it as I walk by rooms where you have professors that are reading their PowerPoint slides to you, but they might as well just give them to you. You cannot connect with your audience if you are looking at your visual aids. You're going to lose the connection with your audience. And they're going to become disconnected. Why not just give them the information and not bother with the whole situation at all? You have a job, presenter. Your job is to present the information in a way in which is engaging and is incredibly fascinating. And your face is going to be a key component of that information. So if you are hiding your face behind a screen, or you're turning your face to read your slides, well, what I would tell you is probably the thing that you should be concerned with is that you do not get to see the feedback, because your audience is giving you feedback about what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And while sometimes, maybe it's high level, just at this point in the stage of your career, maybe you're just looking over people's heads. But at some point, right, it doesn't hurt for you to be checking in and seeing how people are taking in the information. Are they taking it in? Because maybe you'd be in a situation where you can make an adjustment, but you can't do that if you can't see your audience. And the entertainment value that even the most stoic face has, it's worth letting people see your face. And let me say this to you as you start to develop your group project and perhaps future presentations. That, if you go back to the second point, that big brick of information should probably be on your note card. Right. You're highlighting a key point, which is up here. So just highlight key point right here. Maybe you look just to make sure you're on the same page, but then everything you have to say about it should be right here. So that way you can continue to look at the audience. Avoid turning your back on the audience. This is very close to the last point. It is disrespectful, generally speaking, to turn your back on people. I'd say, I know I could speak on behalf of at least a couple of larger cultures, the United States being one of them. For those of you that want to be a future teacher, they tell you that you should learn how to write like this so that you can always keep eyes on your audience. Because the minute that you turn your back like this, people are making out and lighting fires in the back of the room. If you're in a college class, this is absolutely when people are like, oh, this is a great time for me to look at my cell phone. All right, so watch. Always watch. Look, my handwriting is atrocious. My spelling is terrible. I imagine you could probably correct some of the grammar on my PowerPoint slides as well. But the reason that it's there in large font and with less spelling errors and perhaps more legible than my own handwriting is so that I can try to engage you in a human experience versus letting you light fires, make out, look at your cell phone. So this one also, number 6, should also make a lot of sense. You explain content when it's posted. Right? Content pops up, you highlight key points, explain content. In this particular case, you talk about it. I think it pretty much speaks for itself. And then, next content. So when you've finished your visual aid, remove it, cover it, or turn it off. You know, I lose a couple of good teacher jokes by presenting this information in a recorded format, because there's this really cool button on my handy dandy remote here, which, by the way, you're welcome to use in any of your presentations where you use visual aids. It's a really fun tool. I mean, it's upped my presentation. So, up, that makes everything go away. Now it comes back on. I'm going to talk to you about the power of that soon enough. When I started gathering information for students in this basic public speaking class versus what I was going to initially do before 2018, which was work with competitive speakers, I did not know that the B button makes the PowerPoint go dark, which makes the screen turn off. But man, I did know what power that gave me as a presenter. And whatever ranking you might have given me before I knew the power of the B button, or I had, right, this my handy dandy remote here, this is my favorite position, it went up. It would go up. You would watch me before and you would have given me, right, and then you watch me after the use of the B button and the remote, and the overall quality is going to go up. Talk about it while it's up, and then make it go away. 1 point per slide, 5 to 6 bullets maximum. I'm not going to step on content that I want you to look at later, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But one of the speeches for your upcoming quiz, How to Avoid Death by PowerPoint, will explain the value of those numbers. That's all. Okay. Use images whenever possible. Right. Find ones that work, that are appropriate. This is a great opportunity for you to use your personality, to add your personal flavor, your touch. But this is key, right? As an overall rule, and there's always exceptions, one per slide. We have to think about what's going on in a presentation. You've got someone speaking to you. There might be information up there, summarized. Maybe it's something that you're jotting down, right? This is very important. You paid thousands of dollars for this, so you're like, oh man, 10 words. Scribble, 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 scribble. And then maybe there's a fascinating picture that elaborates or adds entertainment value, or has some sort of visual meaning as it relates to the content that's being explained. But one, right? Because there was a lot. I just said that there were 3 different things that were going on. Words out of mouth, words on screen, and picture. Future teachers, and even for those of you that have done your own testing, then you'll know that there are visual learners. There are people that may not remember the words, take very little, if anything, from the words, but they'll remember the images. You're missing out on an opportunity to engage your audience if you're not using images. One image per slide, one image per slide. I had a speaker give a really lovely presentation about the Salem witch trials, and her opening slide had 5 different images that looked like they had been pulled from history books, and they looked like literal sketch drawings or something from the actual time, and they were very fascinating. And she's talking, and I'm excited about the pictures, but my eyeballs are going all over the place. And before I had an opportunity to take it in, she moved it away. But here's the thing. What I would have told her and what I would tell you is that I'm really excited that you have all of those pictures, but you've got to use them 1 per slide as a general rule. Again, there are some exceptions, like all things that are fundamental, but they're very few. They're very few, and I would encourage you to really be able to justify a reason in which you might say, in this particular case, I think I should have 2, right? Or in this particular case, I think I should have 10. Well, then I would go, please explain to me why it works that way. And the last piece of information from this grouping of visual aids information is to make sure that you are prepared to go without your visual aids, right? How many people do you hear complain about tech? Seems like everybody's got something to say about the problem with tech. I don't know, be it audio or the visual, it's working, it's not working. The speaker, the feedback noise from the microphone. Look, it is the presenter that takes a moment, right? How long does it last, right? Until you start to go, okay, this is taking too long. That's probably when you should have moved before then, but it's the person that just shuts it down. Maybe it never turned on in the first place, or kicks the mic stand figuratively, maybe literally, could add some entertainment value, out of the way and says, you know what, I don't need these visual aids. I don't need these visual aids, and I don't need this microphone. I know that everybody in this room can hear my voice, and I think that I could present this information perhaps even in a more effective way without the visual aids. Maybe this was a blessing in disguise. Now, what happened? What happens when you do that? I don't care what you're selling, be it you are teaching a math class, so you're selling math content, so to speak. I use the word sell, right? Or maybe you're actually selling a product. You're in an interview, so you are selling yourself. I would say ultimately in all of those cases, really in all of those cases, you are selling yourself. When you start to fumble with the tech, granted, everybody's going to be given a little bit of latitude. And the more credibility that you've established, the more latitude that you're probably going to have. And when I say credibility, of course, there are just some people in the audience that weren't going to like you no matter what, as an educator, unfortunately, but you've built up a little bit of credibility. You can take a little bit of time. But in the end, you know what? Just go. Problems arise. Who do you follow? In a moment where you are not the leader, who do you follow? Because when you are on the stage, literally or figuratively, when you are sitting in the chair and people are asking you questions, you are in a position, when you're answering at least those questions, you're in a position of leadership. And who do we follow? Do you follow the leader who had a plan? Plan's not working. Sounds not on. Can I get sound check? Because the time's already started. Come on, leader. No. Well, we follow the leader that goes, you know what? It's okay. Let's keep going. Let's move on. And what people have really bought into, it's not your product. They bought into you as a leader. You handled that moment of intensity, that moment of anxiety. Yeah, that's the winning way. I'm going to show you this clip of what I call a potential fail with visual aids. Okay, it comes from a TED Talk. I'm going to play the beginning, and then I'm going to fast forward a couple of times and just show you a couple of brief clips, and then analysis to follow.
Well, hello. This is Sophie. No, it's all right. Don't worry. Everything's gonna be fine. There are some people on the balcony that are very happy to be up there now. So this is Sophie, not Sophia. No, Sophie. She has a French name. Has its own venom signature, if you want, made out of dozen walk. Spiders alone actually thought to produce over.
So what do we see? Speaker comes out, hey, I got a spider in my hands, right? And we hear a multitude of responses. And the speaker has done an excellent job of eliciting emotional responses. Some people are going, ah, right? They're scared, they're surprised. Some people are giggling, and maybe they're giggling because they're scared or surprised, or maybe they're laughing at their friend who's, has arachnophobia, who's sliding out of the chair and looking for the nearest exit, right? There's a multitude of responses are occurring, but right now, speaker is kicking butt. And speaker makes references, hey, you up in the balcony, I bet you're really happy to be up there, and that gets a really nice laugh. And I'm thinking, woo, this is winning, man. I want to keep watching this TED Talk. I fast forward to another clip, spider, spider, spider. And I fast forward to another clip, spider, 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 spider. And because, the rule of three, spider, 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 spider. At one point that I never really am able to find it in my, random fast forwardings anymore. Spider, spider, crawl. And spider, spider. And I just, I get the feeling, like, ask yourself, what are you thinking about? What would you be thinking about if you were listening, viewing that speech, especially if you were there in person? On a scale of 1 to 10, my arachnophobia might be at about a 2 or a 3, but there's still a part of me that would be thinking, if that spider falls out of that dude's hands, I am going to kick this person over and be the first one out of this auditorium, right? The less likely that that thing is going to touch me, right? It starts to crawl, and I'm watching it crawl. And all of those things are happening up here in my head. All of those things are happening up here in my head, but what really should be happening? I should be hearing the science. I should be listening to these incredible innovations that the speaker is presenting, but I can't because that spider is distracting me. And I think that if we took a poll, I think that the overwhelming majority of people would say, spider was pulling at my attention at the bare minimum, if not perhaps a complete and total distraction. So what would I have said? How could we have made this better? I would have said, okay, speaker, right? Because he's going to pay me my low price of $99.99 for an hour-long consultation. People are standing in line. I would have said, I love a spider thing. That's amazing. I love the joke. Brilliant. This little ad-lib joke that you've written in. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. Opener. Open. Woo! I mean, I'm sweating it so good. But what you need to do, right, maybe, there's a little podium or something, so, go behind the podium, grab the little plastic container, take spider, then move on with science. Or, right, here's where you're like, better yet, have someone come out, right, with plastic container, spider and plastic container. They go away. Everyone that's having some sort of fight or flight and or a little bit of stress, some anxiousness, and or like, what did you they can breathe deeply and you can go on with your science. And now that spider is not pulling attention. I have to believe that that's a phrase that you're going to hear me use often throughout the semester, is that of pulling attention. Spider, spider, spider. Right. There are a few different ways in which you can cite sources for your group project, for your future projects, and for your final speech, if you were to use visual aids. Visual aids are not required for your final speech, but there are a few different ways. One of which is that you can just cite your source within the slide. And if you're looking at this slide, then you're seeing a citation underneath the image. The reason that I put that there is just so that I can have an example of what it might look like. You don't actually have to cite your GIFs and the images that you use, but the content that you use should be cited. You've watched the first 1 through 10 visual aids, and I cited the source solely, if nothing else, for the purpose of demonstrating what citing within the slide might look like. Okay. Don't write this down. Okay, please don't write this down, but this helps me tell a story very quickly. You're looking at this https www.eapdfoundation // Woo, that's a lot of information. Don't cite like that. Please don't. Like, let me show you a more sound way of citing within the slides. And APA, MLA, Chicago style, all of these different citations, ways in which you can cite effectively, are quite often making adaptations. I'm going to say this word correctly. Adaptations and changes to the ways in which they want you to cite. And if everything I just said there, right, APA, MLA, all of that, I have no idea what he's talking about. Cool. I got you. This is a 10-10 class. You know nothing about research. You haven't made it into that point into your academic career. Maybe you never will. Okay, just trust me on this part right here. We don't need the HTTPS. We don't need the www and all the slashes, okay? Well, let me move forward very quickly, right? And then I'll move back, right? What you're seeing right here, this, I have to read it off, eapfoundation.com 2016, that is the same as this, right? That's the same as this, but it's cleaned up, right? It's more stylistically accurate, and that is what you should be shooting for. Again, all of the forward slashes and all of that, it's unnecessary. Some of what this is about, I have to believe, right? Unfortunately, I don't sit on any of the councils for the style citation guide group committees, but some of it was really about aesthetics. Okay, this giant citation is pulling attention. Spider, spider, spider. And again, 8 years of college, right? 4 undergrad, 2 master's degrees. No one ever reviewed my sources, at least that I'm aware of. And if they were to review my citations and my sources, they wouldn't need all of the forward slashes, right? They just need the website. So now here is the stuff that I really would like you to have in your notes. You are going to be graded on this. I hate saying things like that to get people to write stuff down, but, I don't know, all right? Crickets. Okay. This eapfoundation.com, comma, all right? Are you paying attention to detail? Comma, 2016, right? The year has relevance, the website has relevance. Your preference would be, I know now that, we live in this high-tech world, and so you're probably not using periodicals at all, or the periodicals that you are using are online, but you'd still be looking for the author's last name. And if you had author's last name, right, it might look like, Gibson 2019. What does he often say? Don't wing it, ever, 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 never, 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 never. Paraphrase quote. I wrote that. If you cannot find author's last name, the website would work as well. But again, no forward slashes, no wwws. We don't need all of that. Put it in the corner. Your choice. you're looking at a font size of what is, I think, 18, right? And so look at how small that is in relation to the larger font size that's on the rest of this slide, right? It's small, looks small, you put it in the corner, and it doesn't pull attention. It's more aesthetically appealing, right? Because even if I had the eapfoundation.com / all of that, that's just a whole lot of letters. It's pulling attention. I'll make it font 32 so everybody in the room can read it and just. So I want to give you an example of what, granted, right, this is from CNN, so it's not an actual citing on the slide, but for the sake of showing you what it looks like when it's small, from Johns Hopkins University, right? Who are we blaming for all of these numbers, right? CNN wants you to believe that they cite their sources and that they've done their homework, and right, who I don't really care who you get your news from, and you'd never know who I get my news from if I'm even watching the news at all. But right, this does serve as a good example of the fact that this is happening in the real world, and so it's something for you to take seriously, right? Small though, tiny, but it's there, right? Just in case somebody wants to go, CNN, I don't trust you. Okay, well, Johns Hopkins University, I mean, they're credible. No, maybe. There's always somebody that could argue. I like this one. It's because I wrote it, so of course. It's my baby. I don't have a lot of babies, but this is one of my babies. Okay, but there's a serious point to be made here. 2 sentences that you should write down. Please be consistent with your bulleted list. It demonstrates matters of concern regarding spelling and punctuation. Okay. Too often, I'm looking at students' work that, be it by accident and or it was created the night before, they're not consistent. And perhaps there are misspellings. And the visual aids that you are using are going to have a reflection on your credibility. And they're going to have a reflection on your credibility because they probably reflect your preparation, right? Or your lack of preparation. Okay. In this particular case, you could call this an exaggeration, right? But it's meant to prove a point. And if some of the misspelling, grammar stuff is irritating you, good, because maybe that's the point. There are people in the room that are so fixated on the fact that there's errors here that I watched this when I put it up, and I have 1 or 2 students where my future English PhD students going, I know, exactly. You can't focus on the content. You can't focus on the point because this is obnoxious. Look, it's going to be made multiple times. The point is going to be made multiple times. You should probably not be, no sentences. You should probably not be using sentences on a PowerPoint slide for a legitimate presentation. I mean, you do have to vary those fundamentals. I am an educator, so there are times where, unfortunately, for our purposes, I have to put a sentence or 2 on the screen. I definitely tried to limit those, but for your purposes, if I was delivering a sales pitch, if I was delivering a rapid fire presentation, if I were to turn this class into a seminar, I would not be using sentences. I would be using key phrases. And I understand that you might have been taught that you should put a period at the end of the sentence. And so if you were going to use sentences in a bulleted list and you put a period at the end of the sentence, then please put a period at the end of all of your one-word bullets. It's a matter of consistency. It's a matter of aesthetics. But in all honesty, maybe you don't need to do periods at all because you're not using full sentences. I had a student on one particular occasion that decided to talk about why we should be able to hunt deer year-round, right? The pros of hunting deer round, a persuasive speech was his final speech, and on his title slide, maybe you don't need a title slide, maybe you do, you know, creative choice, I guess, but on his title slide, the word deer was spelled D-E-A-R. Right, you know, so we should be able to hunt dear mom or dear sweetheart. Pow! Snickers in the room. All right. I'm the educator. I'm just supposed to keep straight face and take notes. But come on. First impressions, we haven't talked about how quickly or how relevant or how important they are per se. But your title slide, it's got the word spelled correctly. But no. Credibility damaged, perhaps credibility completely lost. Why would I take you seriously if you cannot spell the word deer correctly, or you're not using the correct form of the word deer? And I get it, okay? I'm on your side. Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, they're going to be like, yep, spelled it correctly. Right, but again, right, I think, you know, this is where I think the preparation shows, even though, you know, you're like, I can do this the night before. You know, of course you can. Everybody does. Why didn't you ask a friend to look at it? Why didn't you ask your dear mom or your dear sweetheart to look at it? Or perhaps your dear professor? They might have been able to tell you before you went and made a fool of yourself in front of the room that you had misspelled deer. This happens in the real world. Nike was trying to sell Steph Curry on being a spokesperson. Let's go Nike. Help Steph, let's sell Nike together. And they continuously mispronounced his name. And they used PowerPoint slides that had Kevin Durant's name on the slide. So this is what I have to say to those advertisement execs. I hope you were fired. I hope you were fired. You don't deserve a job. I want that job. I know how much money you're probably getting made. I know how much money you probably would have made in commission if you would have made that sell. That's embarrassing on the highest level. You know, if you can't pronounce somebody's name, you're better off just going, okay, yeah, great, good point. All right. Wouldn't you practice that beforehand? I mean, if we're talking, like, how much money did Nike stand to make on this? You know, if they had sold Steph to sell Nike, how much money did they stand to make, right? How, you know, and I guess, you know, Steph has options, right? Because he's with Under Armour now, right? And they're making a lot of money, and he's got his own shoe with Under Armour and not Nike. And I think that that would just make sense. But that's absolutely embarrassing. You recycled the presentation and you didn't bother to have your dear mom or your dear sweetheart look at it the night before. I jest, because perhaps they should have been looking at it beforehand. You didn't do any research or any homework. You just recycled the same product that you used for Kevin Durant. Oh, you know, because see, I would have been like, hey, honey, we're about to go on a really fancy vacation. You know that six-figure car that you wanted? I don't even know what kind of a car costs six figures because I don't live in that world. Right? You know that new Toyota Camry that you wanted? I'm about to buy that for you if I make this pitch today and we're successful. Man, the amount of commission. We'll be living in a new home. Could you look at this for me, please? And she could say, I'm sorry, who was this sales pitch for? Psh, psh. Fix the work. You're going to look like a fool. And in the real world, you should be fired. Please avoid using theme slides. The ultimate goal of this particular course for you is to get your work to look like a TED Talk presentation and or a more professional-esque presentation, and they are not going to use themes. They don't use themes. And this is one of those times where I welcome you to prove me wrong. Go out and find a TED Talk that's got, the cute border all the way around the slides, and definitely make sure it's following all the other rules, make sure it's consistent throughout. And I will show you 10 TED Talks that do not use a theme or do not use borders, because it looks like, and no offense, it looks like middle school. And if you were teaching middle school students, or if you were teaching, because now I'm talking about deviating fundamentals, or you were teaching elementary school kids, it would make sense that you would use this stuff. They would go, oh, that's cute, right? Perhaps they need they're squirrel. So they need all that stuff to look at. I want people to focus on your content. I want your work to look more TED Talk professional-esque. And challenge me if you will. But it pulls attention. Real life example, my ex-wife, worked at Bethel and was asked to deliver a presentation to Bethel employees. And on the slide in the corner, big Bethel logo. And, her being of the sound mind asked me to look at her work well in advance, and we made some changes aesthetically and, looked at spelling and content and tried to minimize the amount of words per bullet, the amount of words per slide. And of course, I had to ask, do you really have to use this themed slide with this giant Bethel logo taking up what I would say is approximately 15 to 20% of the corner of the slide? This is right. This is the format they asked me to give. Okay, let's think about this. This is a presentation that is presented at Bethel for Bethel employees by a Bethel employee. Can we just avoid the redundancy of department? You know the phrase. Department of Redundancy Department. I'm not cutting that out. Look, I wouldn't have taken the gig. I would have said, do you want me to do? I'm not going to do that, because basically what you have sitting in the corner is a giant spider. I know it's a Bethel logo, but spider. My eyeball cannot help but squirrel to the corner and look at that. And you would be in the same way. Click over, next slide, big thing over here. Words, but there's an image. Okay, I get it. Bethel. And for that matter, whoever is using the themed slide, I get it, right? The thematic nature of the presentation or the continuity of it should just be in the fact that it's made by the same author or the collaborators got together. I don't think that you need okay, I'm gonna go, all right. You've decided that you want to use images, pictures, solely pictures in your presentations. And man, the value that you can get from a picture, right? It's a story. It speaks 1,000 words. And so what I want to do very quickly is to model what that would look like for you, and then show you, the magic behind what's happening. So here we go. Very quick demo. I'm a very passionate person, and I want to talk to you about 3 of my passions today: my family, my hobby, and my job. Well, first off, my family. What you're looking at here, right? It's my mom. Sometimes people think that's my girlfriend. Yeah, she's aging well, I'd like to think, and hopefully, right? Good genetics. These are my twin girls. Obviously, not the ones that are ready to graduate yet, but absolutely adorable. Now, I get some summer vacation, and I go and I scoop these girls up. I'm an only child, and I take them to see their grandma. These are her only grandchildren. And while I have them, we blow it out. We party. But I imagine not a question could be running through your head. All right, you're doing the math. You're with me. You're engaged. You're saying, Gibson, you get 3 months of summer vacation. Did you? I hope I did. Say that you only get 1 month with your daughters. What are you doing on the other 2 months? Are you just sitting at home crying? No! I'm out hiking. I like to be outdoors. This is my friend Michael Irving. This is Grantsville Peak. This right here, this is my guru. He's taught me all of the entry-level things that I needed to know about hiking and some things that are very advanced. It turns out a tiny little eyedropper of bleach can clean a gigantic amount of water. I never worked my way through the one that he gave me, just as a starter. And I do like the peak, but I also like distance hiking. When I first discovered the beauty of outdoors, I did not think that I would become someone that would do what I'm about to show you. Side hobby, bizarre. I figured exercise, right, outdoor, but it turns out something that just sort of happened organically is I like to take pictures. And more specifically, I like to take pictures of flowers. And what you're looking at here is me on a close-up, right? I'm just putting the cell phone practically on top of the flower. And when you do that, the image blurs very quickly. The camera's like, I don't know, cameras speak on a cell phone, right? But it's having a difficult time. The wind is blowing. Tiny little breeze, right? Or you wiggle just a little bit and the image blurs. And so you're sitting there, you're waiting, you're trying to focus. You're like, well, stay still, hold still, hold still. And then, right, you capture the perfect image, right? Perfect image. And what I found, the beauty that I found in that particular moment was that what you're looking at here is one moment of time in my life when I wasn't thinking about my bills, I wasn't thinking about my stressors, I wasn't thinking about the fact that I wasn't with my daughters, or whatever things could cause stress. It all went away. My sole focus was on this one thing, and everything else went away. And that's why I love this so much as a side hobby. Okay, let me pull out of the PowerPoint, if you will, as it is, and show you a couple of things. I'm going to say some stuff now that's not written down. This is one of those advanced college hacks, but I'm telling you you should do it before I actually give you the opportunity to do it. There will be times in your college career or your accepting information career where people are going to say things. You should just go, oh, I think that's important. I should write that down. Write as much down or as little down as you think is necessary. And if you write nothing down, that's totally fine. I will never know. This is videoed, but I will see it in your work. I post a picture, and just like I said in the 1 through 10, while it's up, I talk about it. And then I make it go away using a black screen. And what you would note, granted, I tried to give you a fast demo, but what you would note is I was not talking about my family when it was on the black screen. And when I wanted to transition into the content about me hiking with my friend Michael Irving in particular, that picture came up. I talked about it, and then I made it go away. And I tried to give some transitional material that had nothing to do with the flower before I brought up the flower pic, for the point of giving you a demonstration. Okay. When you watch a TED Talk or you watch a professional presentation, you might see this from time to time. A picture pulls up, somebody's talking about it, and then the screen goes black. And then another picture pops up, right? It's not It's not like they black out the screen, pull the old picture back up, and then advance it. It just advances to the next picture. But screen was black in between. How does that happen? I cannot say with 100% certainty, but I can say this is a great way for you to simulate that. If this is not the actual way that it's done. Unfortunately, I've never had a chance to talk to people that run TED or people that vet TED PowerPoint presentations or their slides. And maybe there's somebody down below that's getting it ready, right? But we don't have those people. So how do you give a professional looking presentation, with some blank stuff in between, if necessary, because it may not be necessary. If you are going from content slide to content slide and there's no material in between, right? You're not just telling a story about your ex-wife, right? You don't have a narrative that is unrelated to the content that's up here. You don't have transitional material, then you can just move to the next picture. You could move to the next content slide. Let me give you an example as it might pertain to a group project. You're talking about how to give a good graduation speech. And so you have 5 bullet points. This is how to give a good graduation speech. And of course, you're looking at the audience and you're extending on the bullet points. You're explaining all of that, those little word, your little abbreviated word content information. And then the very next thing that you're going to talk about is the don'ts. You could just go straight to the don'ts. You don't need a blackout screen. The blackout screen has value here we go. I'm going to go back to the same scenario. You're talking about the do's. These are things that you should do when you're giving a graduation speech. And now you go to a blackout screen and you just tell a story about what it was like to attend a graduation in the past, right? You don't, maybe, if you had a picture of attending that or something, then maybe that might, add some value to it. But if you're just telling the story, or you've got transitional material words that are just going to come out of your mouth, you just black the screen out using a blackout slide. Speakers, something really magical happens when you black out the screen, right? And use it in best practice. But you put up the picture and people will go, oh, wow, that's a pretty picture, right? And they'll take that content in and they're probably listening to you at the same time. And maybe they're looking at the picture and they're listening to you if you're not right by the screen pointing things out. You don't have to be. And you make picture go away, screen goes black. Eyeballs go to you. I mean, there's nothing else to look at in the room, right? Now, granted, those are your engaged listeners. But there's value in knowing who your engaged listeners are, right? You have people staring at the wall. I wouldn't focus on those people anymore. If I'm delivering a sales pitch and I'm posting up like this, here, look at this fascinating video clip. I play it and then I make it go to a blackout screen and I start to just do the audience interaction where I'm looking right at them and I'm selling and I don't have anything up here and I've got 3 people over here that are looking at the wall. I'm just going to ignore them and focus on these people. Maybe they're still engaged, but they don't want to engage with me on an eye contact or a face-to-face, and so I'm not going to. Look, as an educator, I'm sorry. I have to hold you accountable for listening, so I'm going to look at you no matter what. But in a particular situation like I just described, I would know who was really engaged with me and who wasn't. And I mean, that happens all the time as an educator in a classroom. I've got content, people take notes, I make it go away, I tell a wacky story, and people are still counting the ceiling tiles. And I'm like, well, but again, though, you get some really valuable information about what is going on in the audience's head when you black out the screen. And of course, it strengthens your overall value as a presenter. Now, of course, let me give you the obvious don't. Okay. quite often, before I started delivering that particular chunk of content, I would see students doing this. Which picture do I look at? How can you ensure that even if you are pointing at the picture of your family, that I'm not more interested in the picture of the students on their cell phones? Maybe I'm really interested in the picture of the students up in the other corner that have $10,000 scholarships in their hands. But you're talking about your family, right? But I don't know. I like flower pictures. They're pretty. One image per slide. It'll help people focus. If you decide not to cite within the slide, I have another way in which you can effectively cite your sources. So please don't use, you don't have to, okay? If you really want to, you can, but you only need to use one strategy. If I'm watching your work and I'm seeing the citations within the slides, I'm going to make the check marks as I see them. Or you could do this. You could just have a reference page slide. Maybe you've built these in the past. But what I want you to do, what I want you to think about now moving forward, and if you did choose to use a reference slide in your work, I will be looking for you to do it this way. I want you to take content that we've already discussed. I want you to create a mic drop moment. And a mic drop moment does not have you saying, like the last words out of your mouth should not be, and here's my sources. Oh, here's my references. Let's say you're doing 80 to 99% of the stuff that we've talked about in class. So you're up there, you're thundering away, you're building towards a fantastic end. And then based on everything you've learned in the past, before I've really shown you this technique, you just say, here's my sources. You want to talk about a really fast way to flush the presentation. There it was, your closing words. That's all, and here's my sources. Ugh, yuck. Okay. What I would suggest is if you were going to close on an image, maybe it would look like this. Maybe there's some cleverness here. Life is like a pencil. Ta-da! Black out the screen. Hold, right? Because what are you supposed to do? You've got your closing words, your closing slide, perhaps your closing actions. Hold, pause for applause, and then you would say, and here's my references. All right, so you can still create a mic drop moment and have a reference slide. You would have a blackout slide. Maybe you only have a couple of things that you present in the very beginning of your, hypothetically speaking, your final presentation. And you've decided to have a reference slide. And so the screen would just be blacked out. And you would be saying something very thunderous like Gandhi said, right thunder. Hold for applause. And here's my references. In theory, you have watched this information before you've watched the Standford group project to prepare for your second speech quiz. So what I'd ask you to do for funsies, if you will, is watch their project and ask yourself, how did they cite their sources? But look for it. I've talked about a couple of different ways in which you could cite your sources effectively. In the future, for your group project, there's a lot of value in watching the Standford Business Group project to ensure that you're prepped fundamentally, best practice, best fundamentals for your group project. And so as you watch it, ask yourself, how are they citing their sources? I mean, we're talking about MBA students. There's no way, right, at Stanford, but I think really in any graduate program, that they're going to say, don't worry about citing your sources, right? It's just something that happens. So how do they do it? Till then.